I'm William Lego. I'm an Augustinian, been for a long time. My association with the Augustinians began in 1966, and I'm a little bit of a rarity for the Augustinians in Chicago because I'm a North Sider, and traditionally the Augustinians are a South Side order. And in 1966, the Vocation directors at the time went to the Catholic grammar schools, and we had a beautiful piece of property in Howland, Michigan, where they had our minor seminary, and they came and talked about, well, having a seminary week in the summer. Well, I took the brochure home, and I gave it to my mother, and she said, well, you're not doing anything, why don't you go? So that was my first being invited by the Augustinians, experiencing the Augustinians. And then when they proposed that we could do the entrance exam for high school, I figured, being in a parish, I was an altar server, and altar servers usually think about being in priests. They go, well, why don't I live away for high school? They were offering good scholarships, and to live away would have, was an interesting idea. And my parents said yes. So then that's when I began in 4 years of high school. And then as God slowly moved into my life, went into college for 4 years of college. And then really in the novitiate is when I came to terms with the Lord was calling me. I had an experience in prayer where I was thinking of leaving, but in a moment of prayer on the silent retreat, the words came to me, come and see. And now if I had people coming to talk to me that God spoke to them in words, the first thing I'd probably say to them was, did you take your medicine on that? And so when I went to our spiritual director and when I had the words come and see, what I began to reflect on was that for the 4 years of high school, the 4 years of college, and most of the novitiate, as I got closer to the Lord, He was inviting me not to do it my way, but His way. And that's probably why I'm still sitting here today. And again, as I said, I would ask people for medicine, that they take their medicine. So when I went into the spiritual director that we had for the retreat, before I sat down, he said, what happened? You're different. And that shocked me. And so I told them the experience, went forward. And then when we went back to our community in St. Louis, the person that I talked to in our community said the same thing. What happened? You're different. So that's probably the basis of my call, was that experience of do it the Lord's way and saying yes to that. Doesn't mean it hasn't been struggling, but that's just the core of how I stayed as an Augustinian, because I really didn't have an association with the Augustinians until that time and when they came and did the vocation talks. Well, my parents were church practitioners. My mom was a lector. My dad went every week. We were churchgoers. My mom the whole time. So I came from at the time a Catholic family. In fact, my dad, I remember one time I was altar serving, and I grew up in a time that I did all the masses. So I did from the old Tridentine Mass to the new one. That's the age bracket that I'm in. And when I was an altar server, I had the paten, and my dad was at Mass, and usually you keep the paten like this, and I came back and I turned it like that, and he yelled at me. He says, you can't do that because the particles on the paten, you don't want them to drop. So I had a very traditional Catholic family as I grew up. As I discerned, like I said, even though I had that strong experience, I realized that if I was going to stay as the priesthood is now, meaning poverty, chastity, and obedience, that I would need to do that in a community of like minds. And the more I learned about the Augustinians, the more that became apparent that we walk together and we share our lives together. So that was my experience down in Peru when I went as a missionary. The community I had was very supportive, and that helped me learn Spanish. And then in all the other communities that I have lived with, that has been through thick and thin, for lack of a better term, that in one way or the other we are very supportive of one another. And that has been a bedrock for me as we go forward.